Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you for your time and thank you for stopping by. Initially, I wrote this week's post covering a new eating plan from Cedar Sinai regarding SIBO and specifically how to avoid certain foods that are high in fiber and how SIBO patients have difficulties with fiber, even though fiber is beneficial for a healthy gut. So I was initially just hoping to write that little post about how about how not to get confused by the current claims that fiber is good for you, and at the same time, if you have SIBO, it's not exactly good for you. But then I noted a peculiar statement in the curated video, and that was that SIBO is caused by food poisoning. Since that was something that was previously only alluded to and never exactly confirmed, even though there were some top contenders, which I write about extensively. Um, I thought I better um, delve into that a little deeper. And sure enough, it turns out I'm right again that the top contenders, that two bacteria are implicated as a major cause of SIBO. And even though there are other causes, one of which is E. coli, and the other is Klebsiella. But the top contender in my book is E. coli, and I'm going to tell you why here in a minute. But so I'm just going to share screen, go over this week's posts, briefly share the homepage again, some things I want you to keep in mind specifically as I go on to help you tie together some interesting threads regarding SIBO and other gut problems and how they all tie together under under a few common denominators. So I hope you'll find it interesting. So here we go. I'm going to share screen. Hopefully. Okay, 1 second. I forgot to bring up my window. Share screen again. Okay. Food poisoning causes SIBO. In the title, two bacteria implicated as major contributors to SIBO. Findings from SIBO expert Dr. Mark Pimentel's new research, the actual bacteria that are now known to cause SIBO. And then I go on to explain about fiber, and fiber is beneficial for a healthy gut, and long-term restrictive diets aren't necessary. As they also say in this video, some SIBO patients have a rough time with fiber. And Dr. Mark Pimentel and Dr. Ali Rezaie introduced a new eating plan for SIBO. This week's recipe is low sugar cranberry and orange yogurt muffins. All traditional ingredients, a cup of yogurt and only 1/3 cup of sugar, that equals 1 gram of sugar per serving. So these are quick and easy. I believe people also made cake and bread with this recipe. But very, very healthy, much healthier for you than anything you'll be buying off the shelf because it eliminates the majority of sugar. Table sugar, cane sugar. So let's make the distinction between sugars here, due to the fact that it breaks down to disaccharide fructose. The two bacteria that cause SIBO, how food poisoning cause SIBO. And this is this is from another doctor who announces that this is the new research from Dr. Mark Pimentel, who I greatly admire as ethical and very smart. And who was going on to hopefully develop a lung machine to treat pneumonia. And if you think that would not be connected to the current news of today, you would probably be mistaken, specifically regarding H2S and human waste as fertilizer. And then I share a SIBO recipe. And then the third video is the new SIBO diet, which they term an eating plan. It's not a diet. And then my commentary and many, many excerpts from Immune for Life, in which I go over again how often I have referenced E. coli in my book and diarrheal conditions. And then 42 symptoms associated with hydrogen sulfide and its toxic byproducts. And then a link to the PDF with those 42 symptoms. The book button and the visit pages on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget to head on over to YouTube and subscribe to my channel. So I'm working diligently to not let this disappear down the rabbit hole, especially now that I've had two major confirmations in the last year. So on the home page, I'm no longer putting this critical info on every page, even though I probably should. Breastfeeding, food security, and water security sanitation are major protective factors against malnutrition and critical factors in the maturation of healthy gut bacteria. Bifido longum is the primary colonizer in the infant gut, and when you don't have that, it's the first step in microbiota alteration associated with SAM, which is severe acute malnutrition. Later, the absence of healthy, mature gut microbiota leads to deficient energy harvest, vitamin biosynthesis, and immune protection. It's associated with diarrhea, malabsorption, and invasion by pathogens. Diet and infection treatment may be unable to restore bifido and HMAGM. I include SIBO in this severe category of gut conditions because it is usually a bottom line condition that you cannot ignore, because the prognosis is usually serious, determined mostly by the underlying disease that led to SIBO. SIBO can cause severe malabsorption, serious malnutrition, and immune deficiency syndromes in children, non-breastfed children, and adults. So you cannot ignore SIBO. That's why it's there. And that's why I specifically list Dr. Mark Pimentel and Cedar Sinai for their excellent work in my book. So let me get to my notes here. So I was among the first to make the connections between fertilization, E. coli, and SIBO in one of the first papers published regarding these connections way back in the early 80s, or way back in the 80s and early 90s. And that was a paper that I found regarding a patent for bifido. And bifido is treatment. It's not curative on its own for reasons I'll elaborate on later, but I thought you might find some of these threads interesting in SIBO and primarily fertilization. So keep in mind those things in the hierarchy of risk. First, mushrooms and fertilizer. In this paper, it was somewhat early research and kind of misguided to blame sulfate reducing bacteria and cow manure as fertilizer culprit when human waste is far more dangerous. And now that's confirmed. Mushrooms would be a better and safer compost material. However, cow manure is not unsafe. However, you can't overdo it with any type of waste fertilizer because it will change the chemical composition and affect the soil bacteria. So for that reason, mushrooms are a much better and safer compost, and they work extremely well. They will give you 10 times the yield of other fertilizers. But you might find it interesting to know that some mushroom supplements were developed specifically by the Japanese to mitigate, or studied by the Japanese to mitigate the effects of H2S, ammonia, and other negative byproducts of fermentation. Chambex is one, derived from Agaricus bisporus, or the common button mushroom, and Deodorex was another. Both of these were marketed to prevent flatulence, but they were mostly studied to negate these dangerous gases and toxins. And they do definitely lower the gases and the toxins. So if you suffer from, they were marketed to prevent flatulence, but if you suffer from flatulence, excessive flatulence, that's a sign of poor gut health, and it might be affecting your liver, so don't ignore that. However, mushrooms, as beneficial as they are, and also due to their fiber, they help a lot of conditions, but they're not curative when it comes to SIBO. Second, traveler's diarrhea. I have written extensively on this topic, and it's now confirmed that one of the two bacteria, along with Klebsiella, is E. coli. I don't know specifically what E. coli, but I suspect GMO, and here is why. Namely, human waste is fertilizer and the cause of traveler's diarrhea. These are modern conditions that were once pretty much wiped out in the Western civilization by proper sanitation, which unfortunately we have now returned to using human waste as fertilizer. Something I have warned against extensively in my book. So even though I will have to track down the paper to see if he names a specific E. coli, but regardless, E. coli on its own has some, how should I say it, immune specific indications of why your immune system might not see E. coli, but nevertheless, I believe that GMO E. coli is even worse than common E. coli, put it that way, I guess. So H2S is one of the most dangerous, so I will try to track down the paper and see if he specifically names an E. coli, and then I'll either put it in this post or somewhere else. But there were top contenders, and E. coli has always been one as one of the most common aspirates found in SIBO. So H2S is one of the most dangerous forms of SIBO. Thanks to Henry Lin and his research, I quickly realized that on my own. And then with the H2S test, that is the newest test, breath test for SIBO. I'm glad that they developed a test specific for H2S. So you might find it interesting that the antidote for H2S poisoning is B12, and I believe it's injections. So if someone, namely workers, namely farmers, are exposed and overcome by H2S, I believe injections is what they would be using as an antidote for H2S poisoning. H2S is as deadly as cyanide. It can quickly paralyze olfactory nerves, and it can drop you very fast. So sewer workers, farmers, people like that have to be very careful of H2S. Healthy gut bacteria are capable of producing B vitamins as well as B12. So I thought you might find that interesting when it comes to H2S. And another vitamin specific to H2S is pantothenic acid, which also involves aberrant fermentation of fructose specifically. So the antibiotic, if you are going the traditional route to get diagnosed with SIBO, the antibiotic normally used is rifaximin. Half of rifaximin was developed by research on snail gut bacteria for this specific type antibiotic, which is very good. They're non-absorbed and they don't lead to antibiotic resistance. But that is just 1/2 of rifaximin. So, and these do nothing to prevent endotoxins. So the natural equivalents to these types of antibiotics are berberine, turmeric, and cinnamon. Lactose will prevent the formation of H2S. So SIBO recipe will also quickly neutralize H2S due to a specific type of magnesium, the zinc, and baking soda. And I know what all of those do specifically, but I'm not going to elaborate. So it should only take about 2 weeks before it will also call the inflammation via macrophage activation, turning pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory macrophages. So within about 2 weeks of use, you should be quickly neutralizing H2S and beginning to feel much better. And I wouldn't advise taking it over 4 months, and I would pay attention to how much zinc you take as well, because overdosing on zinc is not a good idea. So now on to fiber. Is it good? Is it bad for a healthy gut? Yes, fiber is good, but it's not so well tolerated for those with SIBO, leading to bloating and pain. And there are ways around this, primarily avoiding raw fiber. And I'm just going to let you watch the video to see his guidelines. But ironically, okay, diet is not the cause for SIBO, and diet is not the cure for SIBO. I'm going to make that clear. But ironically, one of the first diets, as you'll watch this video, you'll see what he's asking you to avoid. But ironically, one of the first diets that tried to reverse these various gut and immune development issues consisted of nutrient-dense nuts and beans because they were plentiful in poor countries. And these did not work to reverse the immature microbiota. And one of the other issues that happens in poor countries is they don't have access to refrigeration. So that was why those types of foods were tried, because that was what was plentiful. But these studies mostly all developed in poor countries like Africa. So that is how the nuts and beans nuts and beans correlation comes into this little post. But regarding diet, so no, it did not reverse the immature microbiota. So I want you to always keep that in mind. So now, why does Bifido not work on its own, even though it was patented twice and many times for treatment? Cedar Sinai also patented Bifido strains as treatment for SIBO, but eventually it was also not curative. It's not curative on its own. And this is why Bifido is the primary colonizer of the infant gut. It's a maternal probiotic. It does many things, including modulating the immune response. And then as a toddler toddlerhood begins, and then you begin to eat more foods, your healthy, mature adult gut microbiota begins to take shape. This does not happen with infant formula, only with breastfeeding, and the second best would be another type of mammal milk, full-fat mammal milk, and namely colostrum. Colostrum also prevents traveler's diarrhea. It has polyclonal antibodies and will not cause endotoxemia. So, on to another interesting little factoid that I found along the way is that I began to notice that specific antibodies were being added to animal colostrum animal replacement colostrum. And one of those was E. coli. If I remember correctly, which I'm not sure if I do, because this is about 5 to 7 years ago, I believe it was a GMO E. coli. So that told me 5, 7 years ago that this was a condition of concern affecting calves and other grazing animals. So many of these, like the B12 antidote treatment, many of these things were discovered by studying grazing animals. So like sheep, cattle, so you might find that interesting. So anyway, I knew that this is something that had never been added to animal colostrum because there was no need for it, and animal colostrum generally has higher antibody content than that sold for humans, and it has to by law. So when I saw that, I used to give it colostrum to my animals, and so I was always reading the packaging. And I've always simultaneously studied animal health and human health, because usually you'll find that what's affecting animals ends up having significant repercussions for humans. So I've always studied both simultaneously. And Cedar Sinai being a clinical investigative unit, one of the top investigative units in the world, helped me on more than one occasion find some particularly beneficial research. So that's just one more reason why Cedar Sinai and Dr. Mark Pimentel are tops on my list of the pioneers of gut and immune health. So, okay, I hope you'll find that all fascinating, if nothing else. And that, along with specific conclusions and more health pertinent information, can be found in Immune for Life. But those are just some of the entertaining bits and pieces that tie into nutrition, gut health, diarrhea, human waste as fertilizer, something that we adopted, and is a very bad idea that we adopted from Asian countries and South America, as well as many other countries. They use human fertilizer, use human waste as fertilizer, and it just kind of blows my mind that all that we've learned about proper sanitation and how it led to better outcomes, including pneumonia and diarrhea, I might add, which were the top two killers in the US just a century ago, in the world a century ago, that now we are going in the opposite direction. So that kind of blows my mind. And I'd also like to say that the first patent that I mentioned actually originated in Europe. So if you are European and you think you are not affected by any of this, because I'm particularly pointing out Western countries and the use now of human waste as fertilizer. No, you are not immune. And the original research that I found regarding one of the earliest papers on these connections came from Europe. I'm pretty sure it was Germany, but it might have been the Netherlands. I'm not quite sure, but nevertheless, I am sure it did come from Europe. So don't think you're immune anywhere in the world to this information. Okay, so that's all. I'll see you next time, everyone. And don't forget that it has now been confirmed that food poisoning and two specific types of bacteria are now being named as primary causes of SIBO, even if not the only causes. So that's new, and I don't know what's going on, but it's quite amazing. Is someone putting truth serum in the water in scientific research today, because it's been quite an amazing year for things finally coming to light. And I'm just happy to say that with my experience, I know to see a good thing when I see it, and these are some very good new developments. So, okay, again, have a good one. I'll see you next time. Bye.